Hi everyone, this is Cheryl and welcome to my sewing room. I'm going to demonstrate this very popular quilt block called card trick or deck of cards is some of the common names used for this particular block. I've done the card trick before, but I've only used 2 colors, and in this one I'll demonstrate how to use 4 colors. So let's get started. I'm going to start with row 1 up in this corner and work my way across. Then I'll go to this row and then this row. And my advice is make each square, set it aside, and place everything as you're creating it. Don't stitch all your squares together yet. Just make each square and then piece it all together. The finished size of each square is 4.5 inches. If you need instructions on how to cut out quilt fabric squares efficiently, then click on the link in the upper right hand corner, and it's how to cut quilt fabric. On all of your background squares, on the back side, draw a line from corner to corner. Take 1 square of fabric A and your background fabric. Bring front sides together. And on each side of that center drawn line, you're going to stitch 1/4 inch away. Then place your ruler on that center line and then cut it in half. Now you're going to press your seams. Have the darkest fabric on top. Press your seams on the back side, unfold, and press on top. You're going to take just one of these squares, set the other one aside. On your ruler is a diagonal line that goes from corner to corner. You're going to place it on this diagonal line, and you're going to square this block to size 4.5 inches. Now make sure you have fabric sticking out past the 4.5 inch line here and here, all the way around. So we're going to square this up nice and even. So cut this side and then this side. Now turn the block. Now you're going to line up your 4.5 inch line here and here on the 2 previously cut edges. So place those 4.5 inch lines on there. Still make sure your diagonal line is going across that center seam. You want to make sure everything is straight. Then cut your last 2 sides. And set this square aside. Take 1 fabric B square and a background fabric, bring front sides together, stitch 1/4 inch on each side of that line. Place your ruler in the center and then cut it in half. Then at your ironing board, press these seams on the back side, unfold, and press on top, and push this seam towards the darkest fabric. On just one of your squares, you're going to square it down to 4.5 inches. Set the other square aside and don't square it just yet. So do it just like you did before. Make sure you have that diagonal line on there as you are squaring this up. Take the other square that you have not squared up yet, and don't square it just yet. On the back side, you're going to draw a line from the background fabric corner to your fabric B corner. Place your ruler on there and draw the line. Take 1 square of fabric A, and on the front side of it, you're going to line this square up, center it in there, and then on each side of this drawn line, you're going to stitch 1/4 inch. Place your ruler on that drawn line in the center and cut the block in half. Have the darkest side facing up. Press your seams on the back side, then unfold and press on top, and you're pushing this seam towards the darkest fabric. After pressing, you'll notice these blocks are opposite of each other. You're going to take this one here, where the yellow is towards the bottom going that way. Set the other one aside. Now square this one to 4.5 inches. Place that diagonal line. Now you want to turn the block this way. And you're going to place the diagonal line on that center seam going from corner to corner. You want that 4-inch line right here, right where this two seams over here meet. Okay, this is real important. You need to really take your time on squaring these blocks. And then trim one side off, and then trim the other side off. Take this corner and turn it, and you're going to put the 4.5-inch line here and here on the two previously cut edges. And you want to make sure that everything is lined up. That diagonal line is there. Your 4.5-inch little corner right there is right on that corner down there. And then trim your last two sides. Row 1 should look like this. Now let's work on row 2. Take one of the blocks you set aside, which has your fabric A and your background. On the back side, draw a line from the background corner down to the fabric A corner. Then bring the front side together with your fabric C. Place it on top. And center that block in there on that square. Then stitch on each side of it again, a 1/4 inch on here and here. And then when you're done, cut the block in half, and then press your seams, and always press towards the darkest fabric. Now again, you have two blocks, but they're opposite of each other. You want to keep this one here where the block is up at the top. Set the other one aside. Now square this block. And remember, you're putting the diagonal line on this center seam. You're putting that 4.5-inch line right up here where these two pieces of fabric meet. And then go ahead and square this block to 4.5 inches. Place that block in the second row to where the green touches the green, and the fabric C is down here at the bottom. Take one C and one D square. And on the back of one of them, it doesn't matter which one, whatever you can see the best on, you're going to draw a line on it going corner to corner. Now you're going to bring front sides together and stitch 1/4 inch on each side of that drawn line. Then cut the block in half and then press your seams, and again always press towards the darkest side. Set one of these aside. Then square this one to 4.5 inches. And remember, while you're squaring, you're going to leave that diagonal line on that center seam and make sure you have fabric sticking out on all four sides of your block, and then square it to 4.5. Set one of these in the center row temporarily. It will be stitched to another block in a moment. Bring front sides together of A and B. Draw that line down the center, stitch on each side 1/4 inch, then cut the block in half. Then press your seams, always press towards the darkest fabric. Now you're going to stitch these two blocks together. And on the back side of just one of them, you want to draw a line from corner to corner to where you're crossing over this seam right here. And draw your line. Bring these two blocks front sides together. You want to make sure that the seams are going in opposite direction. For instance, this one on top is going towards my right, and this one on the bottom is going towards my left. You want to get those seams in really, really tight, and I recommend you put a pin across there to hold it in place. Then at your sewing machine, stitch 1/4 inch on each side of the line. Then cut the block in half and press your seams. You'll notice that these two blocks are opposite of each other. So select the one where your A fabric is at the top here. So it's A, then on the right side is B, left side C, and bottom D. Take this one and square it to 4.5 inches. Set the other one aside. Take a background fabric and fabric D, bring front sides together, stitch on each side of that center line, then trim the block in half. Press your seams and press them towards the darkest side. Take one of those blocks and put fabric B square on top of it. Make sure you've got that drawn line on there and that this block is centered in there. Then stitch 1/4 inch on each side. You'll notice that these blocks are opposite of each other. You want to select the block to where the D fabric is at the bottom and that the B fabric is over towards your left-hand side. And set the other one aside. And square this block to 4.5 inches. Now your block should look like this. Stitch together a background and your fabric C fabric together. Draw a line down that center if you haven't already done so, and stitch 1/4 inch, and then do the same thing. Take a background with a fabric D and do the same thing. After stitching, cut the blocks in half and press your seams towards the darkest fabric. Take one of each and square them to 4.5 inches. Take one square of fabric D and on the back, draw a line down the center. Take your other block that has the background and fabric C on the other side. You should have one of these already. Place the line going from this corner to that corner. Center this block in there so you make sure it's covered all the way. And then stitch 1/4 inch on each side of the line. Then cut the block in half and press the seams towards the darkest side. Now you can see that these two blocks are opposite of each other. You want the one where the C is to your left, the D is to your right, and the background is at the bottom. So set this one aside and square this one to 4.5 inches. Take your block that has the fabric D and the background, you should have one of these set aside, and square it to 4.5 inches. Now your block should look like this. Now you're going to begin stitching the blocks in each row together separately. One of the things that I forgot to mention and just completely forgot about it, so I want to apologize, is these outer seams here on each side, down here and up here, might have to be repressed in a different direction. Doesn't mean you need to restitch and recut everything. Is that as you're piecing these together, you want to make sure these two seams right up here are going in the opposite direction. So you'll probably have to repress this outside one. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to bring this one on top. Make sure the seams are going in the opposite direction. Stitch 1/4 inch. Now the 1/4 inch you want to stitch now is a scant 1/4 inch, which means you're going to stay slightly below that 1/4 inch line. This is because we want this block to come out to exactly 12.5 inches, this entire block. So do slightly below 1/4 inch. Then bring this one on top, match the seams. Remember I said you might have to repress, stitch a scant 1/4 inch. Then stitch this row together and then this row together. Now I'm going to turn these over because I want you to see how the seams are pressed. Then you're going to press the seams in each row in a specific direction. Row 1 and row 3 are all going in the same direction. In row 2, the seam is going in the opposite direction. And now flip it back over. Now stitch the rows together. Bring the blocks or the rows on top of each other. And you're going to match your seams first. This is real important. Seam on the bottom goes in the opposite direction than the seam on top. Make sure they're real close. It should feel nice and flat. And always place pins on the seams so that it doesn't shift while you are stitching. So match up both seams, pin them, and then stitch that scant 1/4 inch all the way across. And then after you stitch this one on, then of course unfold it, bring this one on top, match your seams, pin the seams, and stitch a scant 1/4 inch. Now press your seams on the back side, unfold, and press on top. And at this point it doesn't matter which direction this seam goes, as long as it all goes in one direction. And then of course press this one, unfold, and press on top. Your last step is to square the block, and it really helps if you have a 12.5 inch square ruler, and go ahead and trim anything off that is sticking out. If you have problems getting all of your blocks the same size, I have a video called How to Square a Quilt Block, and it helps you to determine to get all of those blocks squared to the same size. So click on that link in the upper right hand corner. If you're planning on making a quilt of a lot of card trick blocks and you're not quite sure how to put your sashing on a quilt, then go to the end of this video where you will see a green screen, and I have several videos on how to do quilt sashing. Also, if you need tips on binding, for instance, this is a flange binding. Also at the end of the video, you will see links on how to do your binding. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click on thumbs up, and don't forget to click on share to share this video with your friends. And if you haven't subscribed yet, click on that red subscribe button down there in the lower right hand corner of your screen. Enter your email address, click on that little bell so you receive email notifications about my latest video. I'm Cheryl, and I'm so glad you came to my sewing room. See you next time, and happy sewing!